We said that we were striving to get more of a balance between the male and female guests on our podcast. So we both went onto Instagram stories. We asked you guys for suggestions, and thank you to everybody that got involved and sent some names through. We're working through the list that we've got, and one of the names that kept cropping up was Shona Vertue. So we've just had the pleasure of interviewing her, and wow, she is full of passion, humor, knowledge. By far one of my most favorite interviews I've done. I could have sat there for another 1 to 2 hours interviewing her. This was brilliant. I'm not going to ramble any longer. I hope you guys enjoy. Big thanks to Shona in advance. Without further ado, here's Shona Vertue. Cool. So who is Shona Vertue?
Oh, I forgot about this question. I was like, is this like meant to be a sort of a spiritual kind of quest into my conscious being, or literally just who is Shona Vertue? If we're just kind of going general chat.
You can go deep if you want, yeah.
Yeah, whichever route you want to take it, we'll roll with it.
Has anyone gone deep before?
Unfortunately not.
I think it's probably... No, gosh, I will not be the pioneer of going deep on that one. But I think it's too early, but we can hit it up at the end. But I am well, where do I start? Like I've gone deep in my head.
Simple question, but it throws everyone.
It does, doesn't it? Because it's like, I mean, I can tell you the things that I've done and all, like my history and that sort of stuff, but I guess that does form a part of who I am today. But there are so many things that kind of create that, right? It's like the way you grew up and your parents and relationships that you've had, and like good exes and bad exes and injuries and not injuries. So, I mean, to keep this short, I would just say I grew up in Australia as a gymnast mostly, and then moved into dance, drama, and a little bit of like acting. But essentially movement was always a really big part of my life. And so if someone asked me, like, you know, who is Shona Vertue, I would say at least 70% of that has to do with movement and movement art in some kind of way. And that's where health, I guess, ties into it. Because it's like, if I love to move, and the only way to continue moving, which I think is such an important part of life, is to be healthy. And that's where it all kind of like, it all supports that. So I didn't really answer your question, but I definitely gave us some branches through which we can discuss more and learn more throughout the podcast who Shona Vertue really is.
Perfect. I like it. Let's go straight in with like sort of the training side of things. Describe the Vertue Method to us. Mm-hmm. How did it develop? What is it? For listeners that haven't heard of you, they haven't come across your Instagram yet, and they're listening to this podcast for the first time, give them an overview.
Okay, so the Vertue Method is a method that I created actually only really when I came here to the UK, which was about 4 years ago. But it's essentially a culmination of my experience as a dancer, a gymnast, a personal trainer, a yoga teacher, and just an all-round, as I said, lover of movement and health and wellness, and functioning optimally. And the thing is that to kind of narrow it down, the Vertue Method is a method through which of like moving and eating and meditating, through which I address key things like strength, cardiovascular fitness, calm, steady, focused mind, mobility and flexibility. And that sort of is what it is. So I ask you to do yoga, strength or weight training, and HIIT, and some cardio as well, some steady state cardio.
So it's a very well-rounded kind of approach. Yeah.
Right. And the reason being is that, like, you know, I mean, you guys hear it all the time, like throughout the health and wellness and even fitness industry, we just keep getting bombarded with this whole concept of balance. And yeah, great, but what the fuck is balance? Sorry, excuse me, I probably shouldn't swear on your podcast, but okay, cool. Okay.
We've ticked the explicit box, so we're all good on iTunes.
I'm Australian, good. Okay, good. I'm Australian, so I should have put that. I should have said that. But basically, it's like, what is that? It's such an abstract concept, and I think there needs to be more of a clear voice on, like, authoritative voice on, like, okay, well, I can't tell you what balance is for you because it's going to be different for every single body. But here are some of the things that I need you to tick in order to understand eventually what balance looks like to your body. You know what I mean? So that's why I created the method.
And who do you target the method towards? Do you have like a specific audience, or are you quite generalist in that approach?
Human beings. I tried it. Yeah, I haven't quite sorted out the transformation program for aliens, but human beings it works for. I say men and women, but my language is definitely geared towards women.
Yeah.
And it's because I feel like, obviously being a girl, it's easier for me to reach out to women. Sadly, that's such is the way of gender these days. But I also like to be a strong voice in telling women to lift more weights, basically, or to make sure that weight training or strength training in general is a big part of their health, I guess, endeavors.
Talk us through, outside of like the Vertue Method, your own training right now. Mm-hmm. What is balance for you? How have you got yours? You know, you strength training 3 times a week, 4 times a week, you meditating daily, or every other, how's your own setup right now?
Yep. So it's a good question. It's one I put the other day on Instagram, actually. I do 3 to 4 days of weight training a week. And then in between those days, I'll do gymnastics-based training along with some cardio on those days that I do gymnastics as well, because I find that they can tie in relatively easy. It's nothing. I'm not super exhausted after gymnastics drills, that I can still do cardio. And yoga happens every day, but it's in small amounts, and it ties in with a daily morning meditation as well.
So you do the yoga in the morning?
So yoga and meditation in the morning, yes. Yeah, and if I had a particularly stressful day and I really want to check out, I will do a little bit of a sort of wind down sequence to help me prep for bed or that kind of thing. But most of the time, it's usually just in the morning to help prepare me to be able to sit still for meditation. And funnily enough, yoga was really specifically designed, the asana, the postures, was designed to prepare your body for meditation, for stillness. That was what it was for. Like there's an ancient text called the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, and in this text it says the asana is to help you be better at sitting still. Obviously it's said more eloquently than I just said it, but it's just supposed to get you to eradicate tightness, tension, that kind of thing, so that you can sit still, basically. And
how long have you been in yoga for? Did you kind of add all these layers as the years gone by, or did it all kind of form together at once?
You mean the Vertue Method or yoga?
Yeah, the balance you just talked about in the yoga.
Yeah, so the balance came about really more so when I came to London, because I had all different kinds of clients that I was working with, but the one common denominator that they all had was that they were all under shitloads of stress. Yeah. And so I found that just giving them strength training or just making them do cardio or just making them do yoga wasn't enough to cater to everything that they really needed. In Australia, the lifestyle's really different. And so people were active enough and outdoorsy enough and had a much more chilled kind of day-to-day life that they didn't necessarily need me to work on their meditation in every session or to work on their yoga and mobility, or it was already kind of a little bit in their mindset and lifestyle. Here, it's very different. And ironically, it's like if you want to function better at your job, you need to be sort of working at a really high level in your body, right?
Yeah, for sure.
100%. Yeah, definitely.
So why did you move to London?
Yeah, right. That was like at the bottom of your questions. I laughed because I was like, I always get asked this. Australia, there's a couple of reasons. Australia is absolutely incredible and it will always be my home, and I will go back eventually, but it's an island and there is an island mentality, and I know that we're on an island right now as well, but it's a hub, it's an international hub, and we just don't have that same mentality in Australia. We're really isolated. The media keeps us quite isolated from the rest of the world as well. And it makes for a small-minded culture at times, racist as well. And so it's not the reason that I left, but it's definitely the reason that I don't go back at the moment.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, which is sad. Yeah, it's sad because it's really multicultural, and it's like, but it's definitely extremely racist. There are things that, it's a really racist country.
See, we haven't heard that side of it, have we?
Oh, I've never heard of that. No.
Where I
No,
guess
you guys hear of like the sunny
yeah,
beaches.
you hear the sunny
and
beaches, you know, the calm lifestyle.
Exactly.
Everyone's active, you know, shrimp and barbies.
Yes, exactly. And it is that. It is really that, but it's really about assimilating to that. So it's like if you have a culture that is outside of that Australian way of life, that's, you know, shrimp on the barbie kind of vibe, then you'll be kind of teased and ostracized until you assimilate to the white Australian way of life, which is really sad because it's like, you know, I live in London and there's such an amazing strength based on its diversity. You know what I mean? There's so much. So yeah, so it is like totally off topic from fitness, but
that's what with this podcast, you know, the core of it is fitness related.
Yeah.
But we're cool with it branching off. And I think that's what makes it interesting rather than people coming on and talk about chicken, rice and reps. Let's be honest.
Like that.
Okay, it's quite cool to yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But having said that, delving back into training a little bit.
Yep.
You coach a lot of women.
Mm-hmm.
What are the 3 biggest mistakes you see women make when it comes to training?
So I think, maybe this is, it's hard because I think maybe sometimes men have this as well, but I think men tend to be in it for longer term. So I think women have unrealistic expectations of themselves, their capabilities. So like in terms of their willpower to stick to something long term, I think they also have unrealistic expectations of their body's ability. I always try to say to people, and I say it to both men and women, but definitely to women, is that if you've spent, you know, a good half of your life not taking care of your body, you cannot expect it to turn around in a 12-week bikini transformation.
Yeah. I use the same analogy. I say the same thing.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And so I think it's frustratingly, because of the pressures on women, and I don't mean to get, you know, too aggressively feminist on you guys, but there are a lot of like beauty pressures on women, as we know, and there have been like throughout our entire life. And throughout our entire lives, our generations. But I think that the intention to exercise is very much linked in with aesthetics and beauty. And more we're seeing a change in that dialogue, definitely. And I think Instagram, even though it gets so much bad rap, has actually done a lot to help change that conversation, because now we see more from CrossFitters and different athletes of different backgrounds, and so it's like inspiring in a way that's way beyond just kind of like having a six-pack and having a booty, even though those are things that women definitely aspire to have. Men, on the other hand, have this like intrinsic kind of urge to be strong for various different reasons that go deep into their inner psyche. Women, on the other hand, it's very much like how I look. And I'm speaking very generally here. But the problem with that is that gets really boring after a while. So if you don't see results within 12 weeks or 8 weeks, sometimes as ridiculous as, I've seen things that are like, this is a 7-day program or a 2-week program, whatever
crazy,
it might
isn't
be.
It? Yeah.
Right. It's kind of like, it makes women lose. They're kind of like, oh, all right, on to the next thing. Let me try Botox. Let me try surgery. What can I do to just not have to make me exercise? Because I'm not exercising because I want to feel innately strong. I'm exercising because I'm just trying to do it for this man, or just to fit into my social circle or social beauty standards. So to come back to the mistakes that I think women make, it's like, I really think that it's a mistake to exercise for just aesthetics. I think that's a huge mistake.
Yeah.
Well, what drives you to train? Keep training. Because you've been training
before that, what got you into training?
Yeah.
Well,
now what drives you? Like, has it changed? Were you pulled in from an aesthetic point of view, and now you've got the drive that Akash is referring to? Like, how has that changed for you?
Yeah, it's a good question. The thing is that I've had both, and I talk about this in the introduction to my book, because basically I was a gymnast, and I was a gymnast from like the age of, I was enrolled in a program called Jumping Jelly Babies. And then I got pulled from that and pulled into the elite program, which was training towards the Olympics. And that was from like the age of like 3 to 12. Now, so my intention for eating, moving, stretching, doing anything has always been to get me better at the sport that I had chosen. So I looked at food as fuel. Now that lasted right up until maybe like my teens. And then I started, watching video hits, which were music videos, and like going, my dad started saying, you've got to go to the gym, otherwise you're going to lose your gymnastics body. And so it suddenly like sort of switched for me, and I started noticing boys, and it was kind of like, I just shifted. I was reading magazines, and magazines were very much about like beauty and lean bodies and this and that. So it shifted in me, and suddenly, I sort of stopped doing things for a functional perspective or even a playful perspective. Like kids run around a park because it's fun and they're playing Tiggy or whatever it is, and adults run around a park because they're trying to lose weight for summer or whatever it might be. So that transition happened to me when I was in my teens, mid to late teens. And then I went on a whole crazy journey where I went right down into like competing, like bikini competitors, which is like the total opposite way, which is literally purely training for aesthetics. And learned a lot about my body and fuel and that kind of thing as well through that perspective. But I would say to answer your question in a succinct way, which I haven't been doing, is basically that what drove me initially was function. So like sport, being better at my sport. Then it transitioned to aesthetics. And then it was when I came to London, actually, that I realized that so much of my training was based on aesthetics only. And I lost all this motivation because I was like in a heavy jacket for like 9 months of the year. I was like, what's my motivation if I'm not even getting that gratification for my body? So the transition went back to being strong and being badass and trying to beat personal bests from a skill-based perspective.
It's pretty cool. Actually, it's almost like a bell curve, right? You started from functional, went up into aesthetics, and then back now. That's like a full 360. I like it.
So you get driven now by performance goals and setting PRs and new movements in yoga or.
Exactly. And it's not to say that I don't love having a six pack or having a lean body or having, or meeting those beauty standards that are ridiculous, but it's not enough. Exactly. That's the point. It's not to say that it's bad to train for those reasons. I just think that it's not enough to keep you going.
Yeah.
Completely agree.
I agree. Yeah. You need like internal and external motivation, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome.
So that was,
over to you.
That was mistake one was,
God, it took like 20 minutes. Sorry, guys.
It's fine. It's great. It's great content.
That was mistake one. So I think, but I think that ties women into so many other mistakes, because then it's like that drives like the lack of willpower that they might have, for sticking to something. I think women sometimes can chop and change too much. They don't see this sort of need, like, I think sometimes also, and this might not necessarily just be a female thing, but I think men do take a bit more initiative for whatever reason to understand the inner workings of how training works. Like all you have to do is read like T Nation and like the comments on the bottom of an article that someone else has written, some expert's written, even like everyday people that aren't personal trainers, like an accountant probably knows more, so, because he's male. I don't know why that is, and I'm not going to hypothesize, but women, generally speaking, don't tend to take as much effort to understand those inner workings. Can you guys still hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. And so because of that, I think they don't understand really important principles like the SAID principle or, progressive overload and things like that like are just so freaking important if you want to get results. And I wish that was just more common knowledge. I wish it was like something that women understood a lot more.
That's a really good point.
You're referring to like program hopping. Is that what you're saying?
Totally. Yes. Sorry. So that was the point I was making, was like program hopping, like kind of going, it's kind of like, it's like from one bikini transformation program to the next, depending on how well this person is advertised or whether it's like, some celebrity has endorsed it. It's like, it's crazy. Every week there's something new. And I get it with like female clients that are seeing me. I used to get it all the time when I was really personal training loads. I'd get women saying like, what do you think of Kayla's program? Oh, what do you think of like Ashy Bynes? What do you think of this lemon detox diet? Do you think I should be doing this? Should I go and get my bloods done? Should I, it's like all these things. It's like, whoa, calm down. Like, let's just stick to one thing for a set period of time. Just apply one element of progressive overload and see what happens. Like, you don't need to go crazy. So yes, program program hopping.
You're speaking our language over here.
Good.
One, you're speaking our language, but two, I'd never sort of taken a step back and actually thought of it like that. That when I think back to my clients that I work with, and again, as you said, this is generalizing, this isn't across the board, but it is more my male clients that when I make changes that will ask why, what changes, they'll prompt me sometimes with changes and, what do you think of this? And if I do make a change, it's, do you mind if I just ask why we've done that? Whereas most of the time my female clients they'll just get on with it.
Which is great in some ways.
It's great in some ways, but I'm big on educating, as Akash is as well. We don't just want to give blanket prescriptions to our clients and expect them to, we do to a degree. If you're in for a short-term transformation, you've got 4 to 6 weeks to work with us. You've hired us, trust us, just do it. But if you're wanting this long-term and you want a real lifestyle change and to understand the process of it, then you need to be asking questions and educating yourself. I've had it, when I was training clients in London, like Nick Druitt, for example, Akash. Yeah. Do you remember when he came along to our R&T meetup, and he's baffling us with certain science and stuff where he's, he comes from an IT background.
Right.
Got a mini transformation, decided he wanted to read a little bit more. And then from there, he's listening to PhDs talk about protein metabolism. And
amazing.
And he's coming in, he's using terms that even I'm looking at, I'm like, okay, I need to level up here.
Yeah, totally.
But it's a really good point. I hadn't thought about that actually, that a lot of women they just do. And they don't really want to understand the whys and take away the principles that they can then extract potentially from a few different things.
Exactly.
So spend your time educating. No, go on. Sorry, go on.
Well, I was just going to say, and I sort of feel like, I think it's the question that you were going to ask. I sort of feel like this is what I'm trying to make the education side of it as sexy as possible, because it's like, how do I, this stuff that is most engaged on my Instagram page is like a cover image of my abs, or where I write in the caption, like booty workout. And it's frustrating, but it's maybe the way that I sort of try to lure people in to start engaging with the content, and then hope that the content is educating enough, but it's definitely something that I constantly juggle with.
Interesting.
Sure.
Let's go one more mistake then. So that's 2 out of 3.
So we've done 2 out of 3 and they take so I'm so sorry. Okay, so another one. What was another one that I feel like women do? I think I think, and it depends on, it definitely depends on what their goal is. But I think sometimes women assume that we've got this like really aggressive sweat culture in London in particular, where it's kind of like intensity. It equates to efficacy. And I just don't think and when I say intensity, I don't mean in the strength and conditioning world. I mean in the sort of like
coming out sweating buckets.
Exactly. So
breath.
it's like the boot camp culture, and they sort of assume that's going to be results. And so what I'm always trying to encourage women to understand, particularly women living in London who, can offer, it's not just London, it's just, we are as women physiologically more sensitive to stress. It's the way we are. And so women need to take that into account. So excessively high levels of cortisol can be working against them. Likewise, cortisol shouldn't always get the bad rap. It's a really important hormone, obviously, as you guys know, but it should be used wisely. And the problem is women go from like a HIIT session to, a really hardcore, intense job to, picking up the kids, and then to a fight with their partner, and then to this and to that. And then and then maybe they're dieting too aggressively. And so there's so much stress that they're not thinking of. And so I'm always trying to get women to understand, when it comes to training, especially, training is a form of stress, and it's a good stress and an important stress, but you need to look at the allostatic load in general. So every single bit of stress that's in your life.
Yeah, it's huge overall. In the city, right? With the city workers, they become almost stimulus addicts, right? Exactly. So I think that's a big mistake, because as we know that, it's not all about calories. It's also how your body absorbs those, and your hormones really determine that.
And so if you're not paying attention to it, then, and you're just kind of being too aggressive, then that can.
So what would you say to these people who are doing too many classes? Should they be doing something else, or?
I mean, it's hard because it's easy for me as a personal trainer to go, stop doing classes. And they're like, okay, so what do I do? You know, I can't afford a PT, or I can't afford this. But that's when I say it comes back to education. So read up more. Try to get into understanding how to weight train. And sometimes it can be as simple as saying, you know, doing your research, finding a good quality trainer based on things that they write about, things that they talk about. But then if you were to save like 3 weekends where you didn't go on a massive night out and spend like, you know, loads of money, you would have enough money to do a session with Akash, right? Yeah. Like that's the thing. Or like even to like contact you guys and do a session with you or do a session with me. Anyone, it's like, I think that it's important to take, I guess, back the control as much as possible. So reduce some of the classes, get into the gym, learn how to weight train, start building some strength in the body and understand how to move correctly. And as a really simple rule of thumb, I always say no more than 1 to 2 HIIT sessions a week. Like I just, for as a general rule of thumb for your nervous system, I just say don't be doing more than that, because chances are, particularly for women, they're probably under loads of stress anyway in different areas, and it's just going to work against them. Yeah,
I think an important one as well is that a lot of females can be weight training. They're applying progressive overload. You know, they're following the programs that perhaps we've set them. Yep. They're getting stronger each week. But I will still sometimes have them question, you know, I'm not sweating like I used to when I used to do a spin class. You know, do I need to be out of breath? You know, and I'm like, are your logbook numbers going up? Are you getting stronger?
Yes.
Are you visually making changes? Yes, yes, yes. Are you nailing your diet? Yes. Then no, within that 45 to 60 minute session, as long as you'll get stronger, it's a completely different stimulus to a boot camp, a spin class, you know?
Totally.
So that's important for people listening to this. Yeah. If you are making that transition into doing more weight training sessions and you perhaps think that you're doing it wrong, because, you know, you're taking, you know, up to 2 minutes, 3 minutes, maybe even rest between a set of squats, and, you know, your heart rate's come down. It's not necessarily a bad thing as long as you're progressing in load.
So true.
Weekly. Yeah. That's quite an important one.
Yeah.
So flipping the switch away from mistakes.
Yes.
What are your biggest tips that women can take on board straight away? That you mentioned earlier, you know, we've got loads of different sort of like motivations and stuff, but one of the big ones is to get like an improved butt, right? Every woman now, especially with Instagram and the contorted selfies in the mirrors, everyone wants a better ass. Yes. So what are your biggest tips when it comes to training for glute progression?
Okay, so there's so many. Okay, so three most important. I'm gonna start with I'm going to start with activation. So glute activation is not exhaustion. And that's something that I think sometimes women misunderstand as well. Like sometimes they spend too long, like activating their glutes.
And they actually end up fatiguing them.
Yeah, totally. Exactly. So they might spend like 20 minutes doing some booty band stuff. And it's like, no, you just need to do a little bit. You're just trying to wake them up. You're just trying to wake up that neurological connection. But some women don't do it at all. And so I always say, if you spend 9 to 8 hours a day sat on your butt, you cannot expect it to just switch on when you decide to do squats or lunges or go to a boot camp class, for example, and just expect it to switch on. So I do 100% believe in activation. It can be some lateral band work. It can be as simple as like some single leg glute bridges with maybe a band that you carry around in your handbag. And before you start a yoga class, a Pilates class, or maybe not so much Pilates because they definitely do it in there. A boot camp class where you're about to get on a treadmill, they don't even do, it's ridiculous and it makes me angry. They don't even do glute activation stuff in those classes. And sprinting, I mean, hello, like you sprint with your booty or you're sprinting, with delicate ligaments in your knees and your back, and it's not nice. So I think it's like important to just make it really simple, make sure you do it and don't exhaust. So that's tip number 1. I'm going to say is that okay? We're happy with tip number 1? Okay, good. Tip number 2 is hip thrusting. And the reason that I think that women should hip thrust is just because I really believe it's one of the most effective glute exercises, particularly in a world where we see on Instagram all this stuff around squatting and deadlifting. And they're amazing exercises and they're human movements that are really important. But when it comes to real changes to the booty, learning to understand how to hip thrust effectively is really, really important. And as a little like separate side note to that tip, I would really try to understand the posterior tilt, which is something that I think women don't understand enough because
can you describe that
I will. Yeah. So I would say the posterior, so the anterior tilt is like the Kim Kardashian sort of stance with like a beautifully arched back and your booty popped out, think Rihanna, think Nicki Minaj, that kind of vibe, right? The posterior tilt is like Gollum. So it looks ugly AF, okay? It looks it looks ugly, basically. It's like rounded and like your pubic bones all offensively sticking out, and it's ugly. But at the end of the day, that's like what you need to be doing to get that thrust. And guys get it really well. That's why most guys have really good butts, is because they know how to thrust. And women, we don't have to thrust so much from a human movement functionality perspective. And evolutionary, exactly. So we don't necessarily know that posterior tilt, but once you learn it, your booty will change for good. And it is that kind of like ugly tuck. The top of your pelvis needs to tuck backwards. Am I making sense?
You're trying to almost shorten the gap between the top of the pelvis from the front to your rib cage.
To your rib cage, exactly.
Yeah, you're trying to shorten that gap.
Exactly, and lengthen out sort of the lower back and tuck your tailbone. And there's all these different like cues. Yeah. But I'm sure you guys post a lot about it. I definitely post a lot about it. I always say like your pubic bone should be offensively sticking up in the air. And if you don't have that tuck, it's not going to be sticking up. So understanding that is going to change the game in terms of the hip thrust. And there are so many different variations. There's like single leg. You hear me?
Yeah, we got you.
Yes.
Sorry, guys.
Go again. No worries.
Like all the technological dramas with this one.
Not a problem. So we were just wrapping up on
hip thrust.
The pelvic tilt.
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically offensive, learn how to thrust like a man, and you will develop a very good booty. And then that kind of brings me to my last point around, I guess, tips is, there's too many, because I'm like, now in my head, I'm like, volume is important, and like training it in different ways. But I also, I think it's, to sum it up, is kind of like train it in different ways. So you have to kind of go through different rep ranges to hit it. So it's like go through your really heavy kind of all out, like hit the various different mechanisms for hypertrophy, right? Like mechanical tension is something that women tend to overlook a lot. And mechanical tension, for the record, for anyone listening, is sort of like where you have to like channel your inner superhero to pick it up, basically. So it's like so we're talking like heavy stuff that really challenges your nervous system as well, to do it, as much as you're sort of going for other mechanisms where you're like really exhausting the muscle, like muscle damage and metabolic stress. So your higher rep stuff as well, your isolated stuff. And I think women tend to do the sort of like higher rep isolated stuff, which is awesome, and you definitely should, and you can. All you have to do is look at a ballerina like Misty Copeland. She is genetically blessed, obviously being, African, of African descent, but also she is, she has an incredibly muscular body, and there's no way she deadlifts or anything like that. It's just a lot of movement. But if you want results in a shorter period of time, you don't have to spend 9 hours a day dancing or doing ballet, then mechanical tension, the heavy lifting is definitely going to help get you there, or hitting all of those.
Definitely. Agreed. So on the other end of the spectrum, so we keep switching gears. So now we spoke about mechanical tension. Now let's head on to the other end of the spectrum, to that, which would be, why should we do yoga? And what's the best way for guys and girls to get involved with yoga if they come from like a heavy weightlifting background? How do you change that mindset perception, that it's hippie and
Yeah, totally.
I'm just going to speak for myself here, okay?
I'm selling to you.
Yeah, you are. Basically, sell it to Akash and I.
Remember, I tried it.
Do you know what? Do you know what I sometimes say to men? Is that the amount of feedback. So for all the male clients that I've had who come to me for mobility and yoga, I've had so many messages from their wives and girlfriends saying that it has improved their capabilities in the bedroom.
Oh, really? Oh,
that's totally anecdotal, right? It's totally anecdotal, but it's like, it makes sense. It's like if you have the ability to get that full range of extension as much as you can flex, then you're going to hit the spots that you need to hit, is all I'm saying, right?
Sold. I'm going to book my first class now.
So there you go. So that's one really important key reason. But, I just think that, like, yoga and mobility. Okay, so if we just talk strictly about yoga is very focused upon a couple of things. Look, it's not actually the be-all. I don't think it's the messiah of flexibility, but it was never the function of yoga. Like I said, the function of yoga was to prepare you for meditation. So there are different ways in which it does that. And to eradicate your body of sickness in different ways, to get your lymphatic system pumping, to make sure that you were healthy so that you weren't distracted when you sat still for like an hour during your meditation. So in terms of it being the be-all and end-all of flexibility, I don't think it is. I think gymnasts have a really awesome way to get you flexible. So do dancers. There's lots of stuff with like weighted mobility that's really awesome as well, that can get you results faster. So in terms of trying to pitch yoga to you, what I will say about yoga that I think surpasses any of those other areas is that it gets you very aware of the breath. And it also gets you hyper aware of your body, because in order to execute these postures correctly, I really ask of you to be aware of like the sensations you're experiencing on the end of your nose, down to your pinky finger. And that much intricate detail goes into every single posture that you're supposed to execute. And I think that then translates to any kind of movement, but especially weight training, because it suddenly, rather than just yoga making you feel better, I think that yoga makes you better at feeling. And why that's good is that it empowers you with self-awareness. And that's, I think, the most invaluable thing out of everything. I think it trumps everything. If you can be aware of what your body needs at any given moment, then you have, the secret force of life.
So you think for the mental benefits are greater than the physical?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the context, definitely. But I could say that. I don't want to be that black and white, but I think that it definitely, yes, psychologically and proprioceptively, if that's a word, then yes, I think that it does, because of so much awareness. You have to get the right teacher, because sometimes you get a mobility teacher or a gymnastics coach that's like, all right, I want you to be so detailed on this and this and this and this. So it isn't necessarily yoga that does that, but I think you need a teacher that definitely values that. The breath stuff is really where I think it's key, but even then, I've had some yoga teachers that don't necessarily emphasize awareness on the breath so much, or don't understand that thoracolumbar junction, which plays such a huge part in whether your diaphragm can move in the right way, and that really plays a part in whether you're breathing properly. And if you're not breathing properly, then you're not really doing yoga properly. So it depends on the teacher, right, as well.
So for guys like us, where would you start?
So I would start with 10 minutes a day, definitely, or 5 minutes, even 5 minutes a day. And I would start with me. Shameless plug. But I do try to simplify things. So on my YouTube channel, I have various different sequences that you can start with. And, much the same as the advice that like we try and give to women around like hopping to different, like program hopping. Mm-hmm. I think sometimes guys, maybe women too, will sequence hop. So if you're doing yoga, the same principles apply. You need to have a sense of not so much progressive overload, but definitely like the SAID principle applies. Like it needs to be this consistent application for your body to make an adaptation.
Do you think it can be done like watching videos, or do you think you need to have a teacher there?
Because Yeah, I mean, the ideal scenario in most cases is have a teacher, definitely. And if you can suck it up and go to a local yoga class with your girlfriend and explore different yoga teachers, then amazing. And if you don't mind being the only guy in the class, go do it. You know, it's more and more the stigmas are being broken down around men doing yoga. But I think if you can, then you definitely get a really good sense of how it's supposed to be. Go up to the teacher and say, please adjust me. I'm new. Don't be afraid to say that. It's kind of like that whole adage around guys not allowed to ask for directions. It's like, just go and ask the teacher for directions and say to her, please, like, or him, please help me, please adjust me, please feel free to touch me right up because I need to learn how to do these postures so that you can then do them at home. But, I try to accommodate for people that are like, I can't, they live out in the country and they don't have a yoga studio nearby. It's like, you're going to have to start with yoga videos.
Yeah, I did a month of hot yoga last year.
Was it Bikram or just hot?
Just hot yoga.
Just hot yoga. How did you find it?
I mean, they were good, but the classes only ran 90 minutes long, and for me, that was just too long, and it became quite a burden to go, to have that.
Yeah.
So when something's too long, you'd rather just not go.
Yeah.
So after a month of it, I kind of just stopped.
I can't do 90 minutes. I have to say, I definitely can't. I'm that person that's like checking the clock because also sometimes you feel like they're filling the 90 minutes like with stuff where you're like, we could have fit that into this time and that time. And so, sometimes I feel like that stuff's pointless unless it's like a 30-minute meditation or something at the end and it's an hour class. But with those 90-minute classes, a lot of the time it's like 90 minutes of just yoga and you're like, oh, no. And who has time for that? That
was the problem, because it was hot yoga, so you'd have to drive there, do 90 minutes, then come back and have a shower, and then
totally.
It was a 3-hour journey, round trip, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then the thing that frustrates me as well is that and this comes back to that sweat culture thing we were talking about, which is like, and obviously I know that you don't think that, but like a lot of women talk about going to hot yoga, men too, and they're sort of like, I'm doing hot yoga now, and because I'm sweating in the room, I'm definitely sweating out fat.
Thank you. I'm glad you said that. Am I right in thinking that is there a benefit to hot yoga? There's really, on a physiological level, is there?
If you've got a bodybuilding comp and you need to dehydrate.
Thank you. Yeah,
I'd be so dehydrated all day long. Yeah.
My point to Akash when he told me he was doing it, I was like, oh man, I can't think of anything worse being stuck in a room full of people sweating all over each other. Like, it's fucking grim.
Yeah.
I could see yoga, the point in that, but hot yoga, I'm struggling to get my. And I was wondering whether I was missing it. Yeah, I just don't see the logic of the heat. I don't see what it's doing.
Well, like if it's the heat that they use in Bikram classes where they're blowing, like they just crank up the air conditioning, then that sucks and is so horrible. If it's infrared, well, then there are different benefits for infrared. And there's a lot of yoga studios out there doing infrared heating, which is kind of awesome. And it feels really clean and you feel good and it sort of just warms you up from the inside. So I actually think that those are good and I see the point to that. But the one thing that I often say to people is like, most people are dehydrated as it is. It's hard enough to, I don't know about you guys, but I find it hard enough to get my clients to drink enough water as it is. Add on the diuretic effects of all the caffeinated drinks that they're having, along with, just not drinking enough, and then add a hot yoga class onto the end of that and they lose it all. I'm like, no, you don't sweat fat. You're just losing important minerals and electrolytes.
Yeah. Also, what I found with hot yoga is, doesn't it force you into positions you wouldn't otherwise get into because of the heat?
It can. And this is the thing. So like in cold places like this, I think it's really beneficial because you step in and you don't need to do so much of that the building of internal heat to make you capable of getting into certain positions. But when it was, I used to teach at one in Australia, and this one was infrared, so it was awesome. But hot yoga in an already hot place just doesn't really make sense to me. You're just losing fluid. That's all it is. You're already in a position where you can you're warm enough, you can get into positions. But yeah. And
then you said you follow it up with a meditation.
Yoga.
Yeah, you follow it up with meditation.
Absolutely, yeah, meditation.
And what do you
meditation is something that I think everyone needs. Sorry, say it again.
Are you using a chant or are you just focusing on breath or a point?
So a chant is a really interesting and definitely a really good way of doing it. Like transcendental meditation, you will repeat a chant, and most of the research that comes off the back of meditation's benefits comes off transcendental meditation, which is 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes in the evening, and you repeat a chant, which is training your mind to remain focused on one thing. And that, the reason I love TM, and I don't personally practice it, but I like TM because, you know, if you're doing studies on things, it kind of controls as many variables as possible with meditation. If you're just kind of going airy-fairy, like I sit still for 10 minutes, it's not enough. Like TM is like definitely 20, and you're repeating this one chant over and over. I don't do that because at the moment, I haven't been trained in it. So until I get the time to go to a course and really focus my time to it, I can't do it. I'm not going to pretend to do it. For me, it's 10 minutes in the morning where I do breath work, and I focus on certain types of different, in yoga they're called pranayama, but breath exercises to calm down my nervous system or focus my nervous system or focus my mind, things like that. Yeah.
Interesting. I went through a phase of using Headspace for a bit.
Oh yeah. How did you find it?
I kept falling asleep.
Yeah, totally. So
is that normal, or is that normal?
It is, and sometimes it's just that your body needs sleep, but you're supposed to say, like, I just find Andy's voice really soothing in a baby way. It's kind of like, oh cool, I'll just go to sleep. He sort of has a really breathy, soft voice, and I found myself drifting off as well. Okay. So Headspace didn't work for me, but I know it's worked for so many people. It's been amazing. Okay. I think so here's a really good analogy, actually. I'm going to this analogy was, I think it's in a TED talk, and I thought it was so awesome. So, you know, when someone decides to go on a fitness journey, or like a fitness transformation, right? Let's say they're overweight, unhealthy, they haven't trained ever in their life. And so they start making some changes in their life, and they go, you know what, I'm going to start taking the stairs. I'm not going to get in the lift anymore. I'm going to take the stairs. And when they take the stairs, they do 2 steps at a time. They feel their heart start to beat, and they feel sweaty, and they're like struggling, and they're panting. They're trying to get to the top. They get to the top, and they go, oh my God, that was really tough. And I was like panting. My heart rate sped up. All these things were happening. I must be doing it wrong. I'm just going to take the lift from now on. And that's what people do with meditation. Right? But we know that it's like the panting and the increased heart rate is where the benefits are starting to occur.
Yeah, so
like that's what you want. Yep. Now with meditation, people say to me, well, as soon as I sit still, my mind just races. Or I fall asleep, or this happens. And it's like, yeah, but that is what's supposed to happen when you first sit down. Not so much the sleep, but like your mind racing over and over and over is part of the process. It's part of the consolidation that your brain is doing. It's the first time you've decided maybe to sit down and be still and let all that shit that you oppress or that you distract yourself from now has the chance to come up. And so you have to give it time. And it's much like exercise. It doesn't feel great when you first start it, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't ever do it.
So do you let the thoughts just come in and you accept them, or do you try and you don't try and block them out? Or
I'm not trying to block them out. No, absolutely not. What I'm trying to do is train my mind to come back to some kind of stimulus, and that stimulus is the breath. So all I'm doing is if the thoughts come up, that's totally okay. It obviously needed to come up. As soon as I realize that they've come up and I've been distracted, I then just guide my awareness back to the breath. And over time, and it does happen, I promise, it doesn't happen overnight, but it does happen. Those thoughts don't need to come up like that, and you can actually stay for 10 minutes, for 20 minutes, just completely focused on an inhalation and an exhalation. And why that's really beneficial is that we now live in an era of like, it's like the ADD era. It's like, even though we might not have been diagnosed with ADD a lot of the time, it's like we cannot focus on one thing. There's like, how many times before have you had like 3 conversations going on at once in WhatsApp with the same person? Like, you know, like you'll write to someone and then something else comes over, you talking to this, and this happens, and then someone else messages you, and then there's an Instagram notification, and there's this. It's like, it's too much, and our brains physiologically are changing because of it. And I think it's just, meditation is imperative for every single human being on this planet.
I'm glad that you segued into that, because I was about to say to you, for somebody listening to this, what would be the one big benefit as to why they should do it? You beat me to it. So perfect. Thank you.
Oh, good.
Okay. Going right at the beginning, when we asked who Shona Vertue is, you said, do you want the deep version? Do you not? We'll come to that later. So here's one that potentially could go down that rabbit hole. If you could turn back the clock 10 years, what would you do differently?
Do you know what I would do? I would finished my psych degree. So I started a psychology degree when I was like 19, and I don't think I had the maturity to finish it. You know, I didn't really understand what university was about back then, and I was angry that I had to try and regurgitate information from other psychological experts and doctors and things like that. And I was like, no, I want my own ideas out there. But of course, you have to understand other people's ideas first in order to then, you know, have the understanding to get creative about it. It's like some PT just going, I'm going to make up my own exercises without understanding what exercise is and how to do it. So, you know, I had an immature kind of, I guess, view on university and psychology and what it was and what I needed to do. So I think if I could wind back the clock, I would go and do it and finish it. I'm going to finish it anyway one day, but it just would have been so much easier if I had finished it back then, because my dream is to create a transformational program that incorporates fitness, so health from a physical perspective, and health from a psychological perspective. And I think that it's weird now that there is such a dichotomy between, you know, people in the fitness industry and people in the philosophical kind of emotional intelligence, psychology kind of space. It's like back in like ancient Greek times, right? All of the, you know, a good 50% of all the dialogues between like Socrates and his students were done in gymnasiums. Like it was in ancient Greek times, it was about health, was like health of mind, health of emotion, health of body. And unfortunately now, it's really not like that. You know, you meet like so many like meatheads and like hedge dudes that are not in touch with their emotion. And same with women. It's like the fit women are like so fit and so strong, but they don't have enough awareness of their inner psyche. And I just think that in order to attain true health, we need to bring those two elements together. And so I want to create a program that kind of brings that together.
I think that's missing. Yeah. There's a gap for it.
Yeah, I just don't know how to execute it because I'm not a psychologist, but it's either I'll go and hunt down a great psychologist and do it now, or I become a psychologist myself, which I want to.
Is that where you want to kind of take the Vertue Method in the future?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's just sort of like the final string to the bow, if that makes sense. It's sort of like something, because, you know, as much as I can say yoga and meditation, it's still a little bit too like esoteric and dogmatic to be like, here are practical things. And I think it doesn't cover everything, you know. So I'd like there to be just like we have exercises to switch on our glutes. I think it would be great to have exercises like journaling, for example, you know, getting people to vocalize emotions that they're repressing. I mean, as personal trainers, like so much of our job has been counseling people, and sometimes we become, because there's such a stigma around going to, you know, a counselor or going to a psychologist. People feel like a bit taboo about it, but going to a personal trainer is so socially acceptable. The amount of times that I'm sure it's happened to you guys that we will get problems from people's lives or discussions around things that, you know, in the back of my mind, a lot of the time I'm thinking, you really need to speak to a psychologist about this, or you need to, you know, this is something. And often I'll say that, but there's a delicate way to say those sorts of things. And sometimes people aren't willing to do that. And so you have to become the counselor or the psychologist to really help them.
Are you a fan of Stoicism?
I love Stoicism. I do. I love it. I am. And I think I like to pride myself on maybe being stoic a little, like not all the time, depends on how hungry I am. But if I'm well fed, I'm very stoic, which totally contradicts the idea. But yeah, I do love Stoicism. Yeah.
I could tell a lot of it was coming out in the last 10 minutes or so.
Right. Yeah. And what about you? Yeah,
I'm getting more into it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very interesting.
It's really interesting. Definitely. Yeah. Adam?
I saw the book on Akash's, was it in your downstairs toilet?
Yeah, it was, yeah.
Yeah, I saw that and I thought, I'll have a read of that one day, but I've never really looked into any of it.
What have you got like a philosophy that you subscribe to yourself or?
Myself?
Yeah.
No, not really. No.
Okay, so you're the meathead that I'm talking about.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I'm that meathead that you're talking through all this and I sort of nod along.
He's the meathead, but he's also very wise when it comes to life advice.
I know, I was going to say, I'm like, come on, Adam, like, pick yourself up. You're definitely not that. The questions you guys have been asking me have been, deep. It's not like we're just talking about proteins.
He's a relationship expert. Let's put it
No. I have theories on
women,
like relationship psychology. No, not women.
I'm kidding. Yeah.
On like 2018, like people's mindsets. Instant gratification and dating apps, and Akash and I are always talking about things like this. So I wouldn't say it's a philosophy. I'd just say it's an interest of mine. I love psychology, and it's why I train a lot of females, and I think the reason that I get pretty good results with them is because I find the psychology of it quite interesting. I find that with females there is a lot of psychology involved.
Totally.
From a training perspective, we're not talking about dating, from a training perspective. So so I find that interesting. In terms of like, do I have a philosophy or anything? I haven't really.
No, so you kind of got your own. I mean, I think the thing about psychology is that it's like there isn't any sort of one right answer, and it's like diet and nutrition, right? It's the same thing. It's like we can find research to support almost every avenue, even if they completely contradict, which is the frustrating side of the nutrition world. But it's like, I think psychology is probably the same, and it varies. We're all so different. Our personalities are like our fingerprints. Like everyone's is different, and so it's difficult to subscribe to like one.
It's also constantly evolving as well, right?
And constantly evolving, based on experiences, and there's so many things affecting it. But I think that these days the only way to be a good personal trainer is to have some kind of interest in psychology, because I don't understand how you can work with people and not have dabble a little in some kind of like understanding how humans work.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a missing part of a lot of trainers is just standing on the gym floor counting reps and not trying to understand the whys as to why people are wanting to this. What's their trigger? Which client. I refer to this in articles: which clients to push, which ones to pull. When somebody screws up on a diet, is the client in front of you the sort that you could berate a little bit and give them that kick up the arse, and that's going to do it for them? Or is that going to have the opposite effect and actually just completely kill their motivation and make them feel worse? So I think a lot of trainers, from working on gym floors for quite a long time, so we've come away from it now, but I've watched a lot of trainers, and you see a lot of them just roll out the same psychological approach. Yeah. To every, the client's training plan might be personalized, taking injuries into account and whatnot, but how they're talking to their clients, are they standing on top of them as like a point of authority, and that client's going to respond well to that, or are they crouching down and talking up to them? You can kind of switch that.
It's so interesting. It all plays a part, and I think a good trainer is someone who's sort of like aware of that. Or sometimes you just end up being whatever characteristic trainer, and you don't. I think there's like short-term and long-term trainers, right? So it's like a long-term trainer is definitely one that's got to pay attention to that psychological.
We used to work. We're not going to name him, but we used to work with a guy, Akash knows straight away, who would get pretty damn good results with clients, but he would burn through his clients very quickly. They were like flash in the pan, 6 and 12 weeks. He would often get them lean, but they would never come back. They would never renew. If he did have delicate clients, they would sometimes ask to be switched to other trainers.
Wow.
Because his approach was so
rigid.
Whereas because I ended up training mainly females, I remember at one point I had sort of the manager of the gym say to me, "Why are you sat down a lot?" Like sometimes I look over and you're sat on the bench, or when they're doing split squats, or like when they're on the mats, you sat next to them. And he thought it was me being lazy, but it was me knowing that I'm training a female that's intimidated by this gym. I carry more muscle than she does, and she doesn't want to look this way. So my way of making her, it was, I would just take a seat next to her while she would be training, and I would just and then watch her, cue her reps. And, she would stop the exercise, I would stand up, we'd be eye level again. And then when she was starting, you don't see enough trainers sort of thinking about that side of it.
Yeah. And I think it needs to be a louder dialogue in the fitness industry, because it does make a huge difference. And it's just, I think maybe it's come from this sort of like very patriarchal view, and it's like, ignore your emotions. And as the gender sort of balance out, or you know, we have a more sort of feminine, potentially feminine approach, there might be a bit more of an opening for that. So and it shouldn't be a feminine thing. It shouldn't be that it's a feminine quality to like care about your emotions, but sadly at the moment it kind of is. And so I think we just need to break down those stigmas in the fitness industry, you know, which has predominantly been very much about this sort of macho male scene.
I actually I had to tell one of my friends to shut the fuck up the other day, because I'd just finished training abs in the morning. Right. And I was on the cross trainer, and my job is, as I said, I get quite good results with females. I like to empower them into going into own the free weights area, and you pay your gym membership just the same as the guys do.
Yes.
And anyway, I finished my ab workout, and I'm doing like some cardio quickly on the cross trainer to finish. And he's actually a really good friend of mine. He comes over to me, jumps on the cross trainer next to me, and he's like, "Oh, that girl in the grey leggings." He's like, "Oh, the things I do to her." So I just laugh. I'm just gonna be dead crude. He'll probably listen to this. And I just sort of laughed it off and just went, "Yeah, actually, I used to train her, you know, whatever." And he went, "Yeah, but like the women just need to leave the free weights area sometimes." And I looked at him, I said, "What?"
No.
Yeah. And he's like, "You know, she comes in here, like she looks good, but you know, she takes up like 2 bits of equipment." And I said to her the other day, "You know, do you mind if I work in with you?" And she's like, "No, I've only got 2 sets left." He's like, "I wish a woman would sometimes." He's like, "Now we've got like 5, 6 women in the free weights area. When I first joined this gym, there were no women. They were all on the cardio." Yeah, honestly, he's like, they need to just get back on the bikes. I was like, "Oh man," I said, "Dude, like, shut the fuck up. You're talking to the wrong person here." Like,
oh my gosh. Cool. Yeah, no, it is not cool. It is not cool. If you're
my point to
you
this,
feel very ashamed.
Yeah, my point to this is that, you know, nowadays it is shifting, and it's a good thing in that, you know, women are following each other on Instagram, and, you know, the whole fit chick mentality. Women are training weights. They're embracing getting strong. Yeah. And it's awesome to see. And unfortunately, there are still a few dickheads like him.
Yeah.
That think the free weights area is theirs.
That's all right.
He actually started complaining because this particular gym used to have a little ladies only section.
Oh, I hate those sections.
To make the chrome dumbbells that went up to 10 kilos max.
Right. And the little pink dumbbells. Nothing makes me angrier than those. Whereas over the last couple of years, you know, as more and more females have started training more seriously, they've got rid of that ladies area and they've just merged it into one big area, which I think is great. Exactly.
They should bring the women's area back.
No. Or the worst is like the women's hour, which like was at one time.
I've seen that.
Yeah, where it's like this sort of women's hour where women are allowed to train. And I'm like, how are we ever going to develop equality in this world if like even in the gyms we have to work at a certain time? It's just ridiculous. Crazy. Yeah.
Speaking of you noticing that you saw that at one particular gym, that leads us on to the fact that obviously you travel a lot. Talk us through it. What's your best tips for staying in shape when you travel? So for some of our clients, you know, they are businessmen, businesswomen. What are your go-tos?
Yeah, it definitely depends on your programming. But if let's say you're working with a trainer, then I would just, you know, definitely say to the trainer, we need to think about how I can integrate, you know, body weight training, or, you know, maybe still body weight training, but like maybe you can bring a TRX with you or a band. But at best, like, let's just assume that the gym at the hotel is going to be shit. How can I get in a workout inside my hotel room and not deviate from my other goals or the other program that I'm working on when I am in the gym? So I always have tools with me. And those, as I just mentioned, I bring a band, I bring a TRX with me, TRX with the little like door straps. You can always hook it up. Because the most annoying thing about body weight training at home is that you do so much pushing and there's not a lot, you can't do any pulling. And so, yeah, that just helps me maintain strength. It all unfortunately has to be very high rep, which I just hate. I'm always like, 20 reps, this sucks. Whereas when you're lifting weights, it's just so much more fun. But yeah, and to be honest, as snobby as it sounds, I try to, as best as possible, suss out, you know, the hotels in whatever country I have to travel to that have good facilities. And, you know, the more we kind of demand those, the better they're going to be around the world. And, you know, it is such a privileged perspective to be like, what's this? Is there a squat rack in the gym, you know, at the hotel? But you'd be surprised at how many hotels are really starting to embrace that culture, particularly in the States, obviously. I was in Toronto not so long ago, and I was so impressed. I was like, this is as good as my gym at home here in London, in a hotel. So I think they are evolving, but you need to definitely have something in your back pocket that's just a backup plan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, agreed. What about on the nutrition front? Do you like hunt out? Do you try and scope out supermarkets nearby, or do you just, by this point, you're just in tune with your body and can make better choices and somewhat intuitively?
I think it's definitely a mix between both. Like, I have my go-tos. I definitely am known for the dodgy girl that has like loads of white powder in my
yeah.
Because I have to. The funniest thing, when I was going to Mexico, I have my collagen powder, and I have my my protein powders and all this stuff in separate sort of Ziploc bags. And I didn't want to bring them in my hand luggage because I was like, that's definitely going to get checked. And it's just so, I know that it's not. And they're eventually going to learn that it's not cocaine or some kind of drug. And like, how ridiculous to try and smuggle it in your hand luggage like that anyway. But it's like, it's just that moment where they think they're onto something, and I just don't want to even entertain it. So I put it into my luggage, my bag luggage. And when I got to Mexico, I opened up the bag, and like shit was just everywhere. And there was a note saying, your bag has been searched. And I thought, far out, they must have just been like, oh my, yes, jackpot,
here we
hit
go.
One. We've got this girl. Well, girl, I mean, I guess they assumed with everything that I had in the bag that I was a girl, and they was just like, they didn't ziplock the bag properly, so I had loads of powder everywhere, and it was annoying. But nutritionally, I do take certain things, and I always pack my supplements, and I always pack powders and stuff like that, because I hate the thought of, particularly when you're traveling, it's really, I can't be that snob that's like, I'm sorry, but like, I have not hit my protein targets today.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I just quietly hit my protein targets, basically.
Yeah. Akash and I do the same. We just pack like a tub of whey, maybe some EAAs. Yeah. We just aim to hit our protein target, and then kind of let the food fall,
and let the food fall around it. Yeah, exactly. As long as I feel like I have my protein, I feel okay. I feel like, okay, I'm not, and then it supports the training and I'm fine. But the rest of it, it's like, oh shit, what are you going to do? And as long as I eat enough vegetables as well, that's the other thing. It's just making sure that I'm smashing the vegetables each day, which sometimes is annoyingly difficult in certain countries.
Yeah. Awesome. This has been amazing. Akash, any other questions that you've got?
No, we'll just jump into the rapid fire, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
So 3 rapid fire questions. So say you do decide to go back onto like an intensive diet, even dieting, say 8 to 12 weeks. You give yourself a refeed or a free meal or whatever. What's your go-to?
What is my go-to? It's so difficult. Akash, do you remember how much trouble we had with this? I feel like I would have a refeed like every third meal. I was like, Akash, are you sure I don't need to eat some pizza on the weekend? I would say it's anything that is, off track. The thing is like, I don't diet anymore. And when I say diet, I mean in the sense that it is now. Weirdly, diet, the word diet, this is not a quick fire question, sorry guys, I'm ranting, but like diet, really the etymology of the word is like way of life. And now it's become obviously things that, in different avenues, athletes use it for certain things, bodybuilders use it for another. So I haven't dieted in a long time, and I don't think I'll go back to it anytime soon. So I just try to let off the steam when I feel like I need it, which means that I don't end up needing it like every third meal. It's only when I'm actually on a diet that I'm like, holy shit, I need to eat something. I need to let off some steam. So it makes it worse. So I would say it's like creme brulee, pizza, and creme brulee and pizza are the two that are coming to mind right now.
Good choices. I like those. Favorite alcoholic drink? So say you're sat by the pool in one of these fancy hotels with a nice gym. What's your favorite cocktail or just favorite alcoholic drink?
So in the winter time, if it's like a winter holiday, it'll be like a old fashioned.
What?
Oh wow!
You made his day.
Yeah, I love an old fashioned.
Oh,
you made his day.
Okay, I wasn't expecting that one.
Were you not?
No.
What were you expecting? Like a cosmopolitan?
Yeah. Only because I've never come across a female that's straight up old fashioned.
Oh,
When I
really?
talk to people and, when I order it, I get girls say, "Oh, what's that?" I'm like, "It's an old fashioned." "Oh, can I try it?" "Yeah, sure." They try it and they're like, "Ugh."
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I think it's such
Yeah.
a good drink. So old fashioned, amazing.
Adam's
Love
got
that.
a tutorial video on it.
I've even done like a video on how to make
Have
one.
you? Really? I'm going to hit that video up.
Yeah, I'll take you in afterwards. Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay. So old fashioned, if it's like, a cold place, and then if it's a hot place, this is where I probably will go tacky, and I'll go straight up for like a pina colada, or like, you nice got it. Like when I was in Mexico.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, it's like get that coconut in there, get that pineapple syrup in there as well. It's just so good. So yeah.
I do like the pina colada as well, so I'm down with that.
Yeah, straight out of coconut as well, the best.
Yes. What is your favorite country that you visited?
Yeah, that was a tough question. Like, does anyone ever answer this straight up?
We haven't answered this one to somebody. We haven't answered. We haven't asked that one to anybody yet. You're the first.
Yeah, I mean, I've traveled to so many places, and it's very difficult to say. And obviously I'm like, oh, well, my home, and I love my home, and like I love London, not that that's a country. Sometimes it feels like a country, but it's not a country. But I would say I can't narrow down a country, but I'm going to say as a continent, or kind of like a space, I would say South America is pretty damn incredible. So it's like, from country to country in South America, and Central America too, it's like, it just feels like you're entering different worlds. And sometimes, I traveled to there when I was like 20, and every now and then I'll be sat, in my house here, and like, how you just get like past memories will just come to you, and I think, holy shit, like the way that some of them live in their villages and different areas. And I just think it's just such an incredible way of life. And I'm here in London, like it's just such a like almost like a parallel world is basically what I'm trying to say. And there's like loads of places all around the world that are like that. So that's probably the toughest question I've ever been asked, is what is your favorite country? Because I would also say like Japan is, and like Fiji, where my family's from, one half of my family's from as well, and like there's so many places.
So just coming away from that slightly, or sort of segueing away from it, non-rapid fire. Have you ever done any of the 7 wonders of the world? This is just a personal.
Yeah, I don't know that I weirdly, I've been to I've been to a lot of the places that the 7 wonders are. Yeah. But I've never actually gone to see the 7 wonders.
Okay. I only asked. I text Akash. I was doing my morning walk the other day, and I don't know why, but I just suddenly thought, you know what? We work, from our laptops and everything, got the ability to travel and work. So I just sent him a random text saying, completely random, what do you think about doing, ticking off the 7 wonders of the world?
You should do it.
Once each year. So we potentially said this September we'll do something, but we haven't decided on what. So that's hence my question to you.
Oh, I would look at, because the thing about the 7 wonders is that they're heavily dependent on our world surviving, and so a lot of them are disappearing. And I have a feeling the Great Barrier Reef is a 7 wonder of the world, and that's in Australia. And I would highly recommend seeing that, because I haven't been to the Great Barrier Reef, but I've been around it and in areas, and it's just so incredible that, and it's disappearing at a rapid rate. I mean, it's really, really dying off. So if it is a 7 wonder of the world, then go and see it. If it isn't a 7 wonder of the world, then still go and see it.
Still go and see it.
Amazing.
The last question: who should we have on our podcast next?
That was also a tough rapid fire. I'm gonna go big and say get Brett Contreras on. Yep. I'm sure he'd be down for it. And I'm also going to say Luke Lehman from Muscle Nerds, who's also...
Luke, yeah.
Do you guys know Luke? I'm sure you do.
Yeah.
He's also amazing, and he's funny too, makes great, sometimes line-crossing jokes, but they're still great. And then... I mean, if I go really big, like get more like athlete women on the show, because I think that, and outside, like, I mean, really big, you could go Misty Copeland, who is insane, and I'm sure she's got
let's go a step further. Do you have, like, we want to get more females on the podcast.
Yeah.
I've reached out to a couple, so I put out on my Instagram stories a while ago, girls, who would you want to listen to? And I made a list of people, and I messaged the top 4 people on the list, and they haven't even read the message because they've just it's not even come up as, it just goes through
to private. Yeah, it goes to private.
And these girls have got, hundreds of thousands of, so I get it that they can't answer every DM. So going a step further.
Who are some of the girls? Who are the girls so that maybe I can reach out?
Oh God, it would have been ages ago that I messaged them. Let me.
Must you?
One of them was, I think it was Courtney something. I'll have a hunt.
You can email if you don't want to like name and shame them. Not that it's a shame.
Well, what I was going to ask was, do you have any that you feel that you're on the same wavelength with that would come across well that perhaps we could name drop you?
Yeah, definitely. Or you can name drop me. Just try and name drop anyway. I mean, I think that I'm trying to think of like there are loads of people. I mean, there are loads of women doing amazing things in fitness, in health and wellness. I think the conversation, interestingly, and like you don't have to put this in the rest of the podcast for your listeners, but I was reading. So Women's Health recently put out like a poll on their it wasn't a poll, they were asking people on their Facebook page like who do you want to hear from, so it's sort of the same question. And the feedback was so funny. It was like, stop asking the same Instagram Fitspo girls to come on your on your show or on your lives and things like. We don't give a shit. We want to hear from real life athletes who have done amazing things or who have a passion for fitness or a passion for their sport into a normal life with other jobs rather than like an Instagrammer or an influencer or things like that. So I think as much as it's great obviously to get traction because someone will have a big following and then can promote the podcast, I think looking out for women who are doing amazing things.
Yeah, we want people that speak in the same language as you, basically, like without trying to blow smoke up your ass. Like, let's call a spade a spade. A lot, and this comes down to perhaps the not wanting to, understand the reasons why. There are a lot of female influencers on Instagram that you listen to what they do put out, and the content is terrible. It's terrible. I would rather sacrifice on listeners and have great content with awesome substance. So if you do have any, you don't even need
to me think about
now.
it.
If you can just message Akash or I with a couple of recommendations.
Or I'll link you guys.
That'd be amazing. Yeah, we would definitely rather just give people great content rather than try and get these huge names just for the sake of it.
Totally. Because at the end of the day, it's like, if the product's good, it will sell. Like, and not that this is a sellable thing, but it's like if the podcast is good, people will listen, and it doesn't matter. So yeah, I agree with you. It's just, it's so tricky. They are few and far between, and it's hard to find. I think that's why going down the route of an athlete or an ex-athlete or someone who really has done it for that reason, it definitely makes for great conversation.
Sure. Yeah, I'll be dead honest here at the risk of potentially pissing you off. I'm just going to say it anyway. And Akash is probably cringing now. I've briefly looked through your Instagram. Akash is like, oh, we should get Shona Vertue on. And of course, I look on and I see the amount of followers and I'm just like, all right, okay. So I've read a few posts and I'm like, just one or two briefly. I'm going to be dead honest here. And I wasn't expecting much. I just gonna. It's so bad. It's so good. But I'm just being dead honest that so many females in the fitness industry just don't have what you've got. It's honestly like, take it as a compliment. Like, it's completely. I'm like, fuck, this girl knows her shit, and I'm now gonna actually.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I will be I mean it. I will be checking out the yoga videos. Honestly.
He's going to be...
I appreciate that, but then that makes me think, shit, what's wrong with my posts? It's talking about booty.
No, it's only because I briefly just, you just have a quick scroll, like, okay, I've let Akash write the questions, he was dealing with you. It was pointless me doing loads of research if he's already done the questions.
Right.
So it wasn't that you've put anything, it's more just, it's my stereotypical view of female fitness trainers in general. And I don't want to sound like an arsehole because, my client base is predominantly female. I encourage females to get into the gym. Yeah. I've said to Akash that, when we hire, we really need to try and also balance it out eventually with a female.
Yes.
But it's really, really, and I don't want to sound like an arsehole for people listening to this as well, but it's tough to find women that have done their research, understand things on, I mean, you're talking about like the said principle and progressive overload and mechanical, you just don't hear that coming from a female.
No.
Yeah, so, it's annoying, but it's like, it's kind of like, the thing that's frustrating is that if women don't talk about it more, like in our position as fitness professionals, then other women are never going to achieve the results that they need to. Like, these are principles that, you know, you can't get around. They're like, they're so important. And so, no, I agree with you, and I understand. And it's frustrating, and it has roots in like, in feminism and so much stuff. And so, you know, I'm trying to have that dialogue a lot more, but
seriously, like, keep honest.
I will, but
this is my roundabout way of saying, like, I'm shocked. Which, it's a shame. It's a shame that it's like that.
There's so few of them, right? That's why.
It's like we've been around female trainers. You know, we won't name the gym, but you know what gym we've come from in London.
Yeah.
So we've had access as well, and they look amazing.
Yeah.
You know, they post, you know, great photos and stuff on Instagram, but when you actually get talking to them one-on-one, there just isn't that knowledge base.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's a passion. But there's no real understanding as to the whys, and that's why you've come on. And it's the second you start talking about the said principle, I'm like, oh, okay, okay. And then
drop the said.
Like, it just made me think, oh,
I noticed that as well. Said principles. Oh.
Yeah, and then progressive overload, mechanical tension, and then just the vocabulary, just the way you're talking about it is super refreshing. So basically, if you can find some carbon copies of yourself,
I'm going to do my best. They're definitely out there. It's just sometimes, you know, the other thing that's hard is, like, if you're not good at, like, I'm really lucky to have met people who could teach me how to create good content. And that's come from my manager. That's come from, like, working with photographers, working with artistic directors that can kind of give me that eye. Because if you can't make good content, it's very difficult to build a platform. Mm-hmm. And then if you can't build a platform, then it's hard for us to find you. And so, you know, there is an element of, like, it is important for women to know how to take good photos of themselves or create beautiful videos and all that sort of stuff that you see on my feed. But you can't do that and not have then the other underlying.
You need the substance behind it.
You need the substance as well, and so
that's what's going to keep people on your page.
Yeah,
totally. It's about longevity, right? Long distance
trainers as well. That'd be good.
If what?
If you know any younger trainers who are ambitious to learn, and I think we could hire, that'd be great as well.
Totally. And that's the other thing is, I've just, the only reason I am the way I am, I mean, I'm 30 and I've been doing this for a long time, you know, 10 years, but it's like, I've just been lucky enough to meet great, mostly male, you know, trainers and coaches, and just hang off their every word and had the chance to just really involve myself in it and have that privilege. So it's like, actually, if you can find young female trainers and give them a chance and educate them in a way that helps them to take interest in those sorts of things. But again, it always helps if they had an interest in sport from a young age. That's my theory, is like, they have to have been sporty.
Yeah, the common theme that I do see at the moment is, you know, they want to get in shape because of Instagram. Let's be honest. Yeah, they see people on Instagram, they want to get in shape, or worse, they want to do a competition for the wrong reasons. They don't have that intrinsic motivation. So they're doing it, you know, for Instagram likes and whatnot. And then they get an okay result. You know, their friends tell them they look great. Their friends ask them for diet help. And then from there, it's like, oh, I might as well become a trainer. And they are the ones that burn out really quick. Yeah. I think, as you said, the key really is like you, where you had it from like a functional, you know, grounding from a young age, and then switch to aesthetics and then back. I think a lot of women at the moment, it's a case of wanting aesthetics and just wanting social media gratification. And that's why they're doing it. They're not doing it for a love of training. They're doing it because of the dopamine hit every time their phone goes off and they get a notification.
Totally. Worse is sort of like these Instagrammers that they're Instagram girls who have a little bit of an interest in fitness, and then they see an opportunity to earn some money through both influencing, not so much through personal training, and they go and do their personal training course just so that what they say is kind of reputable,
legal,
right? Validated, exactly.
Yeah.
It's definitely not reputable, but it's validated, and that's definitely a frustrating thing. And you know, both you guys and me and other reputable trainers are really trying to like fight that conversation, which is why I always try to like help other people that I'm like, I see are experts and genuine experts. I'm like, let's try and make your content better so that more people listen to you, and you can battle the other Instagrammers that take great content but have shit captions or shit, you know, substance.
This is what Akash and I said, even about, you know, a lot of male trainers in the industry, especially the ones that have now gone into online coaching, is they're great marketers.
Yes.
And great at content production, but when you look at the results that they get with clients,
non-existent.
And the level of depth that their content goes to is pretty shallow as well. So there's a reason that you've been doing this for 10 years, right?
Totally. Exactly.
You know.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. That's it.
Awesome. So this was a roundabout big compliment, basically saying you caught me off guard.
Thank you.
I kind of got there eventually.
It was like a neg at the beginning, but we got there eventually. So
I've got a bit of a way with words sometimes.
That's all right.
The take-home message.
The sad thing is you're really not the first. I've had so many male trainers say that and roll their eyes at my page and just think, oh yeah, 200K, whatever, this, and like pictures of my abs. Like I said, the cover images of me like pointing to my abs or pointing to my arms. It's so lame, but it's like it lures people in, and then I'm like, all right, let's, you know. Whatever.
I'm sold. I'm sold.
Yeah.
Speaking of selling, please plug yourself. Like you mentioned a book.
Yes, I've got a book.
Just talk through everything, like the YouTube channel, the book, website.
Totally.
Where can people find you? What you're offering?
So you can find me at shonavertue.com, which is my website, which kind of has everything everywhere. So you get the links to the book as well. So the book you can buy on Amazon. You can buy it in Waterstones, like all good bookstores, as they say, sell my book. And it's called The Vertue Method. And my YouTube channel is just my name, Shona Vertue. Make sure that you spell virtue with a V-E-R-T-U-E. So I'm not quite virtuous, but almost. And my Instagram, Shona_Vertue, and just never be shy to ask me questions. I, slide into the DMs, because that's sometimes the best way to kind of have an interaction and get this, any questions that I get from people inspire my content. So don't be afraid to send a question. The only stupid question is the one that you didn't ask, right?
Yeah. I'm interested. Did you self-publish or did you get published your book?
No, I got published by a publishing house called Yellow Kite.
Okay,
yeah.
Cool.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me, guys. It was fun.
No problem.
Sorry about the tech difficulties.
It was worth it.
Good.
It was worth it.
You're gonna see pictures of Adam doing yoga or meditation tomorrow morning.
I can't wait. I can't wait.
It's coming. I'm gonna go buy my yoga mat this evening.
Okay, good. And some leggings. Definitely some leggings.
Might skip those for the first couple.
No, it's all about it. You can't reach enlightenment until you wear some leggings.
Oh shit. Maybe I won't send a selfie of those though. I'll keep those.
No, don't. Let's leave that one. Save it for Akash. He'll have that.
Over to Akash for the outro.
Yeah, so you can find us at Adam Haley 1 on Instagram, or at Akash Fagela, or at on RNT_fitness. Or what are you laughing at?
Because even though you've invested in one of these microphones, you still talk into the fucking computer every time.
That's true, actually.
I thought we'd go over that. I just see this face coming towards me.
Our website is www.rntfitness.co.uk. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please hit subscribe and share with your friends. Thank you.